Well, good afternoon. I'm Linc Smith, the president of the MOAA Public Affairs and Communication Professional Virtual Chapter. Welcome to our Spotlight interview for 3 February 2026. And we are joined by Colonel Kurt McMillen, United States Army retired, the president of the Catalina Mountains chapter for MOAA in Arizona, and also Suzanne Bond, who is the chief executive officer of Esperanza in Arizona. Welcome, Suzanne and Kurt. Kurt, can you share more about your career in the United States Army, also your work subsequent to active duty?
Sure. Was an ROTC graduate out of University of California at Davis in 1977, and then went for an advanced degree at Southern Methodist University after that. I went on active duty finally in 1980. Spent 4 years. Effectively, it was all at Fort Lewis, Washington, as a ordnance officer, taking care of the ammunition supply point out there. And then secondly, when I became a captain, I was the personnel administration officer of the S1 in an Army Service Support Battalion at Fort Lewis. So after 4 years, I left active duty and went into civilian work, primarily with First Texas Instruments and Raytheon Corporation. But from a military standpoint, I did like the military. And so I went into the reserves after that and spent effect 26 or more years past my initial 4 active duty in the reserves. I was primarily in the reserves of planning and operations officer at anywhere from battalion level up through unified command level, which is like Pacific Command, and now it's Indo-PACOM. I stumbled on Triple E, Esperanza and Escalante through the Tucson chapter, which is also a MOAA chapter in this area, and became familiar with Triple E or Esperanza, and immediately thought that what they are doing fills a very strong niche in meeting our mission in terms of supporting military members and veterans. So that's why I wanted to further develop that relationship beyond the relationship that the president of the Tucson chapter had developed, beyond the relationship even that our immediate past president, Chuck Vaughn, had developed, and sort of carry the torch through our chapter in specifically and through for MOAA in general in meeting the needs of military and veterans.
Thank you very much, Kurt. And we're going to get right over to you, Suzanne. Can you tell us more about yourself, your career?
Sure. So I have had the privilege of working with the unhoused community for my entire career. Most of it has been in Washington, D.C. I worked for a very large charity called So Others Mighty, where we met essentially every aspect of a homeless person's need. If they wanted to get out of homelessness, we could get them out of homelessness. And so I had the pleasure of working for an executive director who saw in me a lot of potential. And because of that, he made sure that I oversaw every aspect of that organization, from some accounting aspects to IT to programming to HR. And so he made sure that I was well prepared for leadership, which was a really wonderful thing. I came to Tucson 5 years ago and started with Catholic Community Services, who had a medical respite program for the homeless. That was really delayed and they couldn't get off the ground. And so I took 2 years to fundraise for that program and develop the policies and procedures and get that program built, which I successfully did before coming over to Esperanza. Esperanza is a much smaller organization than some. We are just about $2 million budget right now, but it is such a wonderful organization. We are 36 years old. on land that was donated to us by Davis Monthan, started by a group of Vietnam veterans who were concerned about the amount of veterans facing homelessness in Tucson. And that problem certainly continues. We have 72 beds of transitional housing. Those serve veterans that may have minor barriers and just need a short-term stay, to veterans that have a lot of barriers. They might have just come out of the federal jail system. They may have a lot of sobriety, mental health issues, or health in general issues. And that's something that we see a lot, is that veterans may have been hospitalized for months at a time and have, because of that, lost their housing. We're also seeing a lot of people just getting priced out of their housing. The cost of living has gone up for apartments by 36% since 2022. And so those veterans that are living on fixed incomes have unfortunately been priced out of their apartments and have become homeless. And so Esperanza is there to accept those veterans in same day. As soon as we find out there's a need and that they qualify, we get them onto our property. We accept their family members also and their pets, which is really important to their healing. We are an all veteran campus. And so those vets usually do most of their healing, brother to brother, sister to sister. It's a really incredible community. And we have 16 employees that support the veteran through their transition from our program into permanent housing. It's a real joy to be a part of it.
You talked about the founding Suzanne Davis Monthan contributed land.
Mhm.
A bit more, can you tell us about how Esperanza formed as an organization, the year, who was behind it?
So it was a group of Vietnam veterans. They got together. Really, we were in 1991, we were incorporated. They got together as a group, just really concerned about the number of homeless veterans. Our first CEO was among them. Her name is Betty, female veteran herself. And they just started working together, trying to find the availability of a piece of land. And at that time, there was uh, land becoming available through the government for programs that serve the homeless. And so the veterans got together, they sought that land, and they did. They received 19 acres right off the boneyard at Davis Mountain. And that land was, problematic. It had some flooding issues and whatnot, but they worked together to slowly start building transitional housing. They built their first unit. It was 5 bedrooms. And so they started welcoming veterans back 36 years ago, and slowly built the support system for those veterans. And about 12 years ago, we started to receive VA funding for this housing, which, really helped. At that time, we also started to really start to build more and more property. We also built some long-term housing on our property. So as it stands now, we have the 72 units of transitional housing. We have 98 units of long-term housing for veterans and their families.
Suzanne, let's talk a little bit more about the mission of Esperanza.
Our mission really is to get veterans housed as soon as possible. And so, and get their dignity back. The reality is, when a veteran becomes homeless, it's a really big strike on how they feel about themselves for multiple reasons. I think the first reason, as probably you and all veterans know, veterans are, I think I always call them the OG of community service. Veterans give back to their community. They are givers, they are doers. They do not want to take. And so for a veteran to come to our door to ask for help is an incredibly challenging thing for them. And so when we get them in the door, we're really working to make sure they have their self-worth is comes back to them because they deserve it. While they were homeless, people looked at them like they were less than. People did not make eye contact with them. People avoided them. It's a really terrible place to be. And so once they get inside our doors, we're just working to rebuild them, to make sure that they understand that they are capable, that the skills they learned in the military have not been wasted, that they can put those skills back to work to regain their success. And so we work hand in hand with the veterans to put them back in the place where they deserve to be. And that's a place of great respect. And then we start to work with them to overcome whatever barriers are keeping them from having long-term success and maintaining their housing. And so we develop a goal plan with those veterans. Together with their case manager, they come up with the things that they need to work through, whether that's repaying debt, getting back together with their family supports that they had lost because of their homelessness or their situation, maintaining their sobriety, making sure they're connected to the health resources they need. It's different for every person, but we work on those barriers so that they can rebuild their lives, get a new job if they want to, increase their benefits if that's what they need to do. And then we connect them with the benefits they deserve. And usually that's called a HUD-VASH voucher. Those vouchers enable our veterans to move out of our program and typically pay 30% of whatever income they have to an apartment building in our community. And so that's really the long and the short of it. Get those veterans back so that they can be in society and have the honor they deserve and give back to the community in the way that they want. And so we see that happen in our community every day. And the first thing they start doing is giving back to each other, supporting each other and the new veteran that walks through the door. We often see the younger veterans really helping out with our blind veterans or disabled veterans who might need a little extra help, or veterans helping other veterans, pay for that deposit for their apartment building. It's incredible what they do for each other. And so, at the end of the day, last year we had 78 veterans move out of our program into independent housing. And those veterans are all thriving. They're doing really well. Many times they come back to campus to let us know how they're doing. I just had a veteran return the other day who was buying his own home. And that's such a wonderful thing for him, something that he deserved, very much so. A lot of the times we're seeing veterans that, their whole lives, they lived a middle class life. They raised their children, they may have had a business. It wasn't until they had struggles with a fixed income at the end of their lives that they struggled and became homeless. And so they're you and I, they're normal people. And so it is I'm so grateful for the opportunity to serve this population. Their veterans specifically are the most appreciative group of people I've ever served. They want to give back, and they are just such a wonderful group of people. So it's an amazing mission and amazing to be a part of it.
To the veterans that come through the door at Esperanza, Suzanne, can you tell us a little bit more about the demographic to include the areas that they're from?
So we serve, Pima County veterans. And right now we're seeing more veterans over 65, Vietnam veterans walking through the door than any other age group. That group is actually expected to double in the next 10 years. We do see some younger veterans too, especially as the operations changing on our Air Force base here in Tucson. So that means that people are getting displaced from their jobs. And I think many of veterans have experienced for themselves how difficult that is. My own uncle, I remember his struggle. He worked in the military until retirement. And when he did retire, he had such a hard time finding his own identity again and his self, his values and how he was going to spend his time. Veterans tell me all the time, I was in the military, I had a job, I had housing, I had someone telling me what to do every day, and then I lost all of that. And so when those veterans don't have loving arms to fall back into, which often happens because a lot of homeless veterans that we see are go into the military because they're trying to escape some trauma in their lives. Those veterans often need extra support. And so those are the folks that we're seeing. Um, it's a diverse group of people, but a really incredible group of people. The seniors, a lot of disability, a lot of physical, a lot of mental health disabilities, a lot of post-traumatic stress, depression, anxiety disorders, things that are just making it really difficult to function. Um, and those are the veterans. But I will say also, just veterans with really perseverance, because oftentimes homeless veterans become homeless because they're walking away from everything. They can't take it anymore, the stress, and they just walk away from it all. And so when they come to our doors, they're making a decision to face it all again. And that's not an easy decision. So we have to respect those veterans that are making that decision, committing to come to a sober community, which means even if they don't have an alcohol problem, they still can enjoy they can enjoy a glass of wine on our campus or a bottle of beer. They do make a lot of sacrifices. They have to be back at our campus at a certain time every night. They have to live within, certain rules, which is difficult for an adult. These veterans all choose to do that because they want to get their lives back together.
Could it be said, aforementioned noted, Suzanne, that Esperanza, tailors the program to each veteran?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah, they all have their own individual plans. And, our goal is always to get them out as soon as going to be healthy for them into their own community. And so, sometimes we'll have a veteran that we expect is going to be with us the whole 2 years. But then they come in and they work really hard and they get out and, they are able to move out into their own home in 3 months because they just are so perseverant and work so hard towards their goals. So absolutely, um, each person is going to, go through our program at their own pace and have different goals and different personalities and different needs and wants. And certainly we respect all of those things.
Talk to us a little bit more about your partnership with the Veterans Administration.
The VA is our most major funder. They actually fund about 82% of our programming. So we couldn't do it without the VA. We have a very strong partnership, which supports the fact that a lot of veterans, actually 50% of veterans, do not want to work with the VA. They might not want to work because they had a bad experience with the VA. They were turned down in the past. They were turned away in the past. That happened to a lot of our Vietnam veterans. And so they allow us to accept veterans into our program without ever having to go through the VA doors, which is an incredible thing. Members from the VA will meet them on our campus and support their intake that way. But the VA, for the most part, is the medical provider, the mental health provider for our veterans. They also help us establish work plans to get jobs for the veterans. And members from the VA are on our campus every day, meeting with veterans, making sure their needs are met, making sure they're getting the most out of the services available to them. And in reality, I'd say that the Tucson VA is just incredible. We are so lucky to have such an incredible VA. And so we walk hand in hand together. And we're really blessed for their relationship and their care for the veterans.
To Esperanza writ large, Suzanne, what are your greatest challenges?
Well, our greatest challenges are really when I took on the position 3 years ago. The prior staff hadn't focused on any fundraising at all, and so we had been underwater. Like I said, the VA funded 82%, so they were not making up for the difference. And because of that, the buildings had really suffered. So I'm working to make sure that we meet all the needs of the physical structures and building a reserve for those buildings. But then also we want to make sure that we're not just meeting the most basic needs. Kurt and I have really gained our partnership in making sure that we could go beyond just meeting the basic needs of our veterans, but honoring their need to pursue education. To have Kurt and I got together and kind of thought through what we wanted to do to help our veterans go beyond just getting a job at the Circle K or the gas station down the street, but to maybe get their degree. So we worked together so that the MOAA Catalina chapter gave computers to the veterans that are working to go to school. And those kind of relationships have been really incredible because those veterans would not have an opportunity to buy a laptop computer without those relationships. And so that really gives the veterans the access to job searches and attending school and just being a part of the fabric of this country in a different way. And so I'm really grateful for Kurt's interest in helping us in that way. But we are really working very hard to go beyond just the basics. We also just started an intensive sobriety program for the veterans as the need for sober living supports has grown in our community drastically. And so we just want to make sure those veterans can meet their health care needs and their need for more. Their need not just to end our program and be okay, but to thrive. And so I guess that's my biggest need right now is to make sure that's available to them.
Back over to you, Kurt, for a second. Suzanne's talked about the computers that you
Mhm.
donated to Esperanza. What's the source of the computers and the equipment to go with it?
Okay, well, first of all, because of MOAA, we have applied for in the last 2 or 3 years and received a grant to help provide our support to Suzanne and her organization at Esperanza. We complement that with donations either internally from members of our chapter or externally from friends, typically friends of members of our chapter. And one thing I want to say beyond that is, well, thanks to MOAA, obviously, for giving us the opportunity to get funding from them to do important stuff with organizations like Esperanza. But I think our chapter has been donating computers for about 3 years now. But what I finally realized after talking to Suzanne, I asked her over a year ago, is this important to you? And she looked at me and basically said, yes, you dummy. We were looking for, I believe my philosophy is that we provide support that's targeted and focused and not broad brush to water it down, but something that's very impactful. And when you're talking to computers, people on the outside looking in may say, well, that's a pretty easy solution. But that's a real short-sighted perspective on it because, yes, it may look like an easy solution, but how many times when you identify a solution, it's complicated to identify the right one, but after you do, people say, oh, that was really easy. I could have done that. Well, maybe they didn't. So what we're looking at with the computers. And besides, for your information, I think you know this, Link, we expanded that not only to laptop computers, but to desks and chairs and even small printers and cables and stuff like that, so that they can use them before they transition to independent living, but then take the items with them and use them in support of a new profession, of kids' schoolwork, of spouses' needs, and things like that. So when you look at it, it not only has a short-term enabling effect when they're still in Esperanza looking for, I'll say, that way out in a positive way, but once they transition, though the value of what we've provided to them, I think, keeps multiplying as the months and years go on. So I feel very satisfied with what our chapter is doing for Suzanne. I know in my own life how electronics have helped make me successful. And frankly, I believe there's probably a lot of folks in the pre-transitioning phase that they may not have even had any introduction to computers and that sort of thing. So as needed, we can provide mentoring also in the use and things like that. But in this day and age, it's a very internet connected, electronics focused environment out there. And if you don't have any experience, you're way behind and have to get back to, ground zero very quickly. And I think with what we do for Suzanne in Esperanza, as I said before, it's very satisfying. And I think we've got a good solution until Suzanne tells me otherwise. I think that's what our focus is going to be in the future, because it seems like they are enabled to succeed in a long-term way.
Yeah. And if I could add to that, we can just put a face to this conversation, because one of the wonderful things we do when we pass on, when MOAA passes on those computers to the veterans, is sit down and have a lunch with them and learn more about the veterans, which is it honors them. And the veterans feel very honored in those conversations to sit down with this group of people. And then the folks from the Catalina chapter get to know who is receiving these computers. And I'll just speak to one of the gentlemen that received the computer. 7 years ago, he suffered from a stroke. He's an older gentleman. And that brought him to this homelessness. It took him away from the job that he was able to do. And he's going to use that computer to go back to school and learn new skills. And he said to me, they can never understand what they've done for me and how much it means to me, that they took an opportunity for me to see me and to give me the tools that I need to be successful. He's a very proud military man. He just can tell, his eyes filled up with tears just because of the conversation he and Kurt had. He's a pretty shy person, but when I looked over at Kurt and him talking, they were just going on like my mother talking to me. But he opened up like a flower. And so it's the computer, the printer, the desk and the chair, but also the respect from a fellow veteran.
Suzanne talked about trust. I think because we're a military organization and we're retired after 25 or 30 years service for the most part, even though we're officers and maybe have been enlisted, they know that we can empathize with the sacrifices they make, that you have to rely on others around you to succeed. Not only your family who's back maybe in the US thinking about you and supporting you, but those people that are to the right and to the left of you. We've all been there. So it was very gratifying. I know the person that Suzanne is talking about, And frankly, he did not want to be there. He was very shy and introverted when he first got there. And I thought to myself, how am I going to talk to this guy? But it was very easy to do after just a short period of time because he opened up and flourished. And as Suzanne said, tears came to his eyes. And it was really emotional for me as much as it was emotional for him. And he told me, I said, hey, tell you what, I would like to come back and see how you're doing. How's that? And he said, no, he said, I want you to come back and I'll tell you how I'm doing. So he's right there. That showed me he, like the other three recipients, are taking strong ownership of their future. And they're able to do that because they have a real support system around them.
Let's talk a little bit more about how long Esperanza is for each veteran, and are there some that don't leave so quickly?
It really depends on the veteran's needs. So, our shortest stay was 3 days. That was just a veteran that had an apartment already, but they couldn't afford a hotel to bridge them from the lease that had ended and their start of their new lease. Then we'll have veterans that, will stay with us up to 2 years or even a little longer if we need to extend that stay. And so that will happen. Oftentimes, we'll have veterans that really are hesitant to leave our campus. And that's because, they've been surrounded by other veterans. They're no longer lonely. They're afraid to go into their own apartment and be by themselves. They don't want to leave the great case managers who's been there supporting them. And so we do a lot of things to bring them back on campus, but one of the more effective things we've done recently is we try to encourage veterans to move out into the same facilities as their veteran friends. And so we'll find a facility that or a apartment building that might have 2 or 3 or 4 vacancies and get them to all move together. And that's been wonderful because then they get to keep their companionships. They have the fellow veterans to count on to be there for them, and that's been a really great thing for the veterans. The one thing that I do think is missing from our continuum of care is there's really not a lot of places for poor veterans that are becoming aged and maybe needing extra support to go. Oftentimes, we are forced to move somebody into a placement where maybe we're concerned that in the next year they're going to need more support than living independently. And so my goal is before I retired to build on our campus supportive housing for seniors that would have, someone in the space cooking for them, monitoring medication, making sure that somebody's always there if a veteran falls, taking care of some more of those things. So that's a goal for us. And that would be permanent in nature. So veterans coming into our transitional program could move into that program if their needs required that.
Really, your question and to your points here, Suzanne, for both of you, uh, when a veteran leaves the military, could it be said with fair confidence that they lose their shipmates, as they'd say in the Navy? And that's a big part of it out in society. It's no longer the Navy, the Army, the Air Force.
Yeah, I think it's different for most everybody in the military. Some can transition from the military environment to the civilian environment very well. And it probably has to do with the fact that they were doing 36 hours of work in a 24-hour day previously, and now they're transitioning to doing 36 hours in a 24-hour day in a civilian job or wherever they are. But there are those, especially the long-term military members, I believe, that and as Suzanne touched on this very strongly previously, they've been in that same environment, that same support structure for years, if not a couple decades. And then they're on their own. And many times you're told, yeah, we'll be there to support you, but a lot of times when you're out of the military, you just don't know what you don't know and where to go. I mean, you hear about the VA, but how does the VA really work? Gosh, I've been associated with them for probably over 30 years, and I don't know the answer to that. They're more on in survival mode than anything.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, Kurt. And it's unfortunate. Our military has really improved in a lot of ways, but our friends that are Vietnam veterans, they didn't receive the mental health supports they needed in the military. A lot of them were subjected to substance abuse while in the military. Um, there's a lot of head injuries. There's a lot of other traumas that these veterans have, had. And I know that those veterans that have been subject to, on the lines, they were in battle. I've been told by veterans many times, my training made it very difficult for me to come back into society and not feel angry and not feel road rage and not want to yell at my colleague. And those are all things that prevent me from being successful. And those are things I needed in combat. So there was so much sexual abuse in our military, and that happened to men and women. If you happen to be a military member that was, a male that was a little bit feminine, you could get really abused if you were being a veteran for that. And so there was a lot of veterans that really suffered. And for that, there's still a lot of healing that needs to occur. And sometimes that causes incompatibility with the ability to take care of themselves and thrive outside of the military. But I will tell you, the military community, as I have come to know it, is the most supportive, amazing community. Um, and so reintroducing that to them is such a healing thing because it is such an incredible community.
Suzanne and Kurt, you may want to weigh in on this too. Do you believe, to be straight up here, America understands the United States military and the veteran? And to some of your points, is it that it being the understanding improving?
Well, that's a loaded question. I think as time goes on, I would look at it from two views, from the bottom up and from the top down, like I look at a lot of things in my life. From the bottom up, because there are still a lot of veterans in the population out there. Yes, I think it's probably as strong as it has been in the past, maybe not getting stronger, but at least as strong as it has been in the past. My biggest worry is from the national level down, where our leadership, the population within our leadership is becoming more and more lean with respect to military duty and military experience. Again, because I touched on earlier about having been there, done that, there's much less of those folks in our leadership than there were even 10 years ago.
I'm a completely empathetic person by my nature. I have the pleasure of direct experience talking to these veterans about their experiences, but I could never truly understand. It takes a it takes a veteran to really understand another veteran's walk. And so I don't think we could ever get it. And I know a lot more than most people about the sacrifice a family makes and the sacrifice those veterans make. Now, I don't think most of them would be homeless if it wasn't for their service. Um, but do I think I could totally like meet with a veteran and be like, I totally know where you're coming from? No, I don't.
Back to your work, Suzanne, now many years. Future plans for Esperanza.
Yeah, so we are right now growing in our behavioral health supports and substance abuse programming. which I'm really proud. We got a grant from the state of Arizona through the Homes for Heroes program that is helping us to face that terrible addictions issues that so many veterans face. We wish to grow the senior supports as more seniors come online. And just my goal is to really make sure our campus is the safest and most supportive campus it can be. So really good things lay ahead of for Esperanza. And by the time I retire, I will pass on a really healthy campus. I have somebody in mind to take over because I think that's an important thing to do. It's probably going to be 5 years for me because nonprofit leaders should not hang on too long. Um, but I also want to make sure that when I am passing it on, the new leader centers on that dignity for the veterans because you cannot sit across from somebody and think of them as the other or the less than and really serve them. And so we've got to continue to sit across from somebody and see their worth and their value and their sacrifice every day.
Suzanne and Kurt, anything else you'd like to spotlight about Esperanza or the
Well,
Catalina Mountains chapter?
dovetailing off of what Suzanne just said, I think my job, as long as I'm president of the chapter and also in other roles when I'm not president, but I'll be past president, so on and so forth. My job is to help keep our members motivated about what we're doing with Esperanza, the meaning of it, and the satisfaction we get from it. Because I can help set up the environment for people to be motivated, but they have to motivate themselves. So there's some that may not ever be motivated by this, but I know we have other members of our chapter that when I'm not there anymore doing other things or whatever, for whatever reason, I know that I'll be satisfied to know that there's other people who are carrying the torch.
Yeah. And I'm so grateful to Kurt and MOAA for all the support that you provided for our veterans and more than just the direct reports, for the advocacy you do and for everything you do for the veterans. It's so important. So thank you on behalf of the veterans.
Very good. And with that, Colonel Kurt McMillen, United States Army retired, president of the MOAA Catalina Mountains chapter, and Suzanne Bond, Chief Executive Officer of Esperanza. Thank you very much for joining us on another edition of the MOAA Public Affairs and Communication Professional Virtual Chapter Spotlight Interview.